The warship floated in the cold silence of space, its engines humming softly as it drifted towards its destination. On board, a strange and tense atmosphere filled the air. The crew of the USS Vanguard had just captured several alien prisoners from a recently conquered planet, and among them was one who had caught the attention of the ship's commander, an alien girl, who looked as terrified as she was confused. She had pale green skin that shimmered under the lights of the ship, her large dark eyes darting nervously from one corner of her cell to the next. Her hands trembled as she sat on the cold metal bench, her breathing quick and shallow. She had never been this far from her home, never imagined she would be taken captive by humans, beings who, as far as she knew, were monsters. Her people had told her that humans were cruel, barbaric creatures, known to devour those they captured. There were stories among her people of entire villages being wiped out by human soldiers, of human rituals where their enemies were eaten alive. The girl had heard the rumors, and she believed them all. To her, humans were nothing but monsters in disguise. She heard footsteps outside the cell. Her heart raced and she instinctively backed into the corner of her small prison, afraid to face whatever would come next. The sound of boots on metal grew closer until the door slid open with a hiss. A human soldier stepped inside. He was tall, dressed in the standard uniform of a soldier with a serious expression on his face. He didn't seem like the monster she had imagined. His face was calm, almost kind. But she didn't trust it. She couldn't. Not after everything she had been taught. The soldier stepped forward, standing still just inside the door. He didn't approach her immediately, but instead observed her, his eyes scanning her form, almost as if waiting for her to speak. She didn't. Her lips trembled, but she kept silent, her body stiff with fear. "Are you going to eat me?" The question came out of nowhere, startling even herself. She had meant to say something about her captivity, to demand answers, but the fear in her gut twisted the words into something else. The soldier blinked, clearly caught off guard by her sudden question. He paused, then slowly shook his head, his lips pressing into a thin line. "No," he replied simply, his voice calm but firm. "We're not going to eat you." Her heart skipped a beat, but she wasn't sure if she believed him. How could she? Humans were known to do terrible things, things far worse than any alien could imagine. Could she really trust a human, especially one who had just captured her? I don't understand," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. Why are you keeping me alive?" The soldier regarded her for a moment, his gaze softening slightly, though he still stood with military precision. He crossed his arms and spoke again, his tone softer this time. "We're not here to hurt you," he said, his voice steady but not unkind. "You're a prisoner of war, and we're taking you back to Earth. You'll be questioned, and after that, you'll be given a chance to go home. No one here is going to harm you." The alien girl shook her head, disbelief written across her face. "I don't believe you. Humans don't let prisoners go. You—" She hesitated, her voice trembling as the memories of old stories and myths filled her mind. "You eat them. You eat everyone who is captured." The soldier took a step closer to the bars of her cell, his face softening in what seemed like genuine concern. He didn't laugh or mock her fears, and that struck her as odd. Most humans she'd heard of would have mocked her, but this man didn't. "No, we don't eat people," he said, his voice steady. "Those are just stories, rumors. I don't know where you heard them, but they're not true." The girl's eyes narrowed. "You expect me to believe that? After everything I've been told?" The soldier paused for a moment, taking in her words. He could see the fear in her eyes, the uncertainty that was keeping her from trusting him. He had known that prisoners from different species often had their misconceptions about humanity, but this was something different. He didn't know if it was something deeply rooted in her culture, or if it was simply her fear speaking. Either way, it was going to take time to break through. "Look," he said softly, leaning a little closer to the bars. "I'm just doing my job. I'm not here to hurt you. and I'll do my best to make sure you're treated fairly. You'll be safe. But if you're still scared, I understand. It's not easy being taken prisoner. But we're not like the stories you've heard." She stared at him for a long moment, studying his face. He didn't look like the monsters from the stories. There was no cruel glint in his eyes, no hunger for violence. Instead, there was only calm determination. But it was hard for her to let go of the fear, the deep-rooted belief that humans were capable of unimaginable horrors. "Just don't hurt me," she said quietly, her voice trembling once more. "Please." The soldier nodded, his face serious. "I won't hurt you," he promised, his voice unwavering. "You have my word." He turned and walked away, leaving her alone in the small cell, her mind racing with conflicting thoughts. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust his words, but her upbringing had taught her to fear humans with every fiber of her being. And yet something about his tone, his calmness, made her question everything she had been taught. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to wonder if, perhaps, the humans weren't the monsters she had feared. Days passed, and the alien girl remained locked in her cell, her mind constantly swirling with thoughts. She couldn't shake the fear that lingered in her chest. No matter how much the human soldier tried to reassure her, she still believed that something terrible awaited her. Humans were not to be trusted, she thought. They were predators, hunters of those weaker than themselves. Her prison was small, barely big enough for her to stretch out. The walls were cold metal, and the single light above her flickered occasionally, casting long shadows on the floor. She spent most of her time sitting, staring at the door, waiting for the next human to come in. It was late one evening when the soldier returned. This time he brought a small tray of food, a bowl of something she didn't recognize. She eyed it suspiciously as he set it down in front of her. "You need to eat," he said, his tone gentle. "It's just food. It'll help you stay strong." The girl looked at the bowl, her stomach growling despite her fear. She hadn't eaten much since she was captured, but the thought of eating something prepared by a human made her uneasy. She had heard stories of humans feeding prisoners strange, dangerous foods, but she wasn't sure if they were true. "I'm not hungry," she replied, her voice flat. "I don't trust you." The soldier sighed, sitting down on the floor outside her cell. He seemed patient, as though he had dealt with this kind of fear before. "I understand," he said quietly, "but you need food to stay strong. We can't help you if you're too weak to think clearly." She glared at him, still suspicious. "Why don't you just get it over with? I know what you're going to do. I've heard the stories. You humans don't keep prisoners alive, He raised a hand, cutting her off. "The stories you've heard aren't true. We don't eat people. That's not what humans do. We don't hunt for food like that. We eat to survive, just like everyone else." The girl shook her head in disbelief. "How can I believe that? Everything I've been taught says otherwise." The soldier leaned forward slightly, his voice soft but firm. "I get it. You've been told that we're monsters. But that's not who we are. We might fight, we might take prisoners, but we don't eat people. That's not how we survive. We value life, even if you don't believe that. Yet," she stared at him, trying to make sense of his words. It was hard for her to let go of the fear that had been ingrained in her from childhood. The stories her people had passed down about humans and their brutal ways were so vivid in her mind. She had been taught to be cautious around humans, to run and hide if she ever encountered one. But this man was different. He wasn't like the monsters in the stories. He wasn't threatening. He wasn't angry. He was calm, almost kind. Yet she still couldn't bring herself to trust him completely. "Why would you keep me alive then?" she asked, her voice shaky. "What do you want from me?" "We don't want anything from you," he answered, his voice still calm. "We just want to understand. Your people attacked us, yes, but we don't want to destroy you. We want peace. We're not going to hurt you. I'm just here to make sure you're safe." "Safe?" The girl scoffed. "Safe from what? You mean safe from other humans, don't you? Safe from whatever horrible fate you have planned for me?" The soldier frowned but didn't respond immediately. He seemed to be considering her words, trying to figure out how to explain things in a way that would make sense to her. After a long silence, he finally spoke. I'm not asking you to trust me all at once. I know that's not easy. But I'm asking you to trust me a little. Just enough to know that I'm not going to hurt you. And I'm not going to let anyone else do it either. The girl's heart beat faster at his words. It was difficult to believe him, but something in his tone made her wonder. Maybe there was some truth to what he was saying. Maybe humans weren't all the same. Maybe they weren't all monsters. I don't know how to trust you, she said quietly, her voice filled with uncertainty. I've been taught to fear you. I know, he said gently. But not everything you've been told is true. You're scared, and that's okay. But not all humans are the same, just like not all aliens are the same. Some of us want peace, not war. Some of us want to protect life, not destroy it. The girl looked at him for a long moment. There was something in his eyes, something that felt sincere. But it wasn't enough to completely erase her fear. It wasn't enough to undo years of stories and warnings. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that maybe, just maybe, this human soldier wasn't like the others. Maybe he was telling the truth. I'll try to believe you, she said finally, her voice soft. But it's hard. It's hard to forget everything I've been taught. The soldier smiled slightly, his eyes warm with understanding. I don't expect you to forget right away. Just take it one step at a time, that's all I'm asking. With that, he stood up and walked toward the door. As he left, he glanced back at her one last time. I'll leave the food here. It's up to you. If you want to eat, just know that I'm here if you need anything. And with that, he left the room, the door sliding shut behind him with a soft hiss. The girl sat in silence, staring at the bowl of food in front of her. Her stomach growled, but her mind was filled with questions and doubt. Could she trust this human? Could she trust that he really meant no harm? And could she ever forget the stories that had shaped her entire life? The next few days were quiet. The human soldier, whose name she learned was Alex, continued his visits to her cell, bringing her food, talking to her and trying to convince her that humans weren't as terrible as she thought. It was hard for her to believe. Even though Alex's words were kind, she had grown up with stories of human cruelty. How could they all be lies? Alex never pushed her to talk more than she wanted. He respected her silence when she needed it. But he always returned with a calm smile, as if he hoped one day she would speak to him without fear. The girl found herself looking forward to his visits, though she would never admit it aloud. The way he treated her with respect, never once raising his voice or showing any sign of aggression, made her wonder if perhaps humans were more complex than the stories made them out to be. One morning, as Alex entered with another tray of food, she noticed something different in his expression. He seemed a little more relaxed, a little more open. "How are you feeling today?" he asked gently as he set the food down in front of her. "Any change?" She stared at the bowl in front of her but didn't answer right away. Instead, she picked at the edge of the food, her thoughts tangled in confusion. She was still afraid, still unsure of what to believe, but something inside her was shifting. The fear was still there, but it didn't feel as heavy. "I'm thinking," she replied after a long pause. "About what you said. About how humans are not like the stories." Alex nodded as if he had expected this. "And? What are you thinking?" "I'm not sure," she said honestly. "I've been taught to fear you. My people were taught to fear you. But you don't seem like the monsters I've been told about. You're not what I thought." Alex smiled softly, a look of understanding in his eyes. "It's okay to be confused. I can't expect you to forget everything you've learned overnight. It takes time to see people for who they really are." The girl looked up at him, her large, dark eyes filled with a mix of curiosity and uncertainty. "But why would you be kind to me? Why help me? You've taken me as a prisoner. I'm nothing to you. Why do you care?" He paused for a moment, considering her question. "Because it's the right thing to do," he said simply. "Just because you're a prisoner doesn't mean you're any less of a person. I don't care what your species has done, I care about how we treat each other. That's what makes us different from the monsters in the stories. Her heart beat a little faster as his words sank in. She had never heard a human speak like this before. It made her question the things she had been told. Could it really be true? Could humans care about fairness, about right and wrong, in a way she never imagined? Alex sat down on the floor outside her cell, not demanding anything from her, just sitting quietly. He didn't look at her like a prisoner or an enemy. He looked at her as if she were just another person, someone who needed understanding, and in that moment, the alien girl realized something. She had been so focused on surviving, on protecting herself, that she hadn't taken the time to see the human as a person. She had been so sure he was a monster that she hadn't noticed how similar he was to her. Fear, doubt, confusion. She had felt those emotions herself. Maybe it wasn't so different from the way he must have felt. You don't seem so bad, she said quietly, almost as if she were thinking aloud. You don't seem like a monster. Alex looked at her, his expression softening. I'm glad you're starting to see that. Humans can be a lot of things, flawed, complicated, but monsters? No, not in the way you've been told. The girl hesitated before speaking again. Are you sure? Are you sure humans never eat people? Or do terrible things like the stories say? Alex's face grew serious, though still calm. I can't speak for every human, but I can tell you this. I've never eaten anyone, and I never will. I'd rather die first. The things you've heard, they're just stories. But I know that they've shaped how you see us, and that's not something I can change overnight. The girl nodded slowly. It was hard for her to let go of the fear. It was like a thick, heavy fog that had followed her all her life, and now it was hard to see the world clearly. She wanted to believe him, but there was always a part of her that couldn't shake the feeling that the stories were right. But maybe, just maybe, he was telling the truth. I don't know if I can ever fully trust you, she said after a long pause, but I'm starting to think you're not what I thought. Maybe humans are different. Alex smiled, a small but genuine smile. That's all I can ask for. Trust doesn't happen all at once. It takes time, but it's a start. They sat there in silence for a moment, the only sound the quiet hum of the ship's engines. It was a peaceful silence, the kind that didn't feel uncomfortable. For the first time, the alien girl felt like she wasn't completely alone. As the days passed, the alien girl began to look forward to Alex's visits more and more. She still didn't fully understand humans, and she still had doubts, but something inside her was slowly changing. She was beginning to see a different side of humanity, one that wasn't painted in the cruel, dark colors of the stories she had been told. And that small change, just a shift in perspective, was the beginning of something much bigger. A bond that neither of them could have predicted, but one that would change both of their lives forever. The days were passing by, and for the first time since she had been captured, the alien girl felt a strange sense of calm. Alex continued to visit her regularly, bringing food, speaking with her, and making sure she was comfortable. She still had her doubts, still feared what might come next, but there was a small part of her that had begun to trust him, a small part that no longer saw him as a monster. She had never felt anything like this before. In her own world, trust had always been earned through actions, actions that proved someone was strong, capable, and protective. But with Alex, it was different. There was no fighting, no need to prove strength. It was simply kindness and patience, and somehow, it was enough to make her start to question everything she had believed about humans. One afternoon, as she sat on her bench, staring out of the small window in her cell, she heard the familiar sound of footsteps. Alex was coming. She didn't even need to see him to know it was him. She had gotten used to his presence, and now for the first time she didn't feel afraid. The door slid open, and Alex stepped inside, his expression serious. The girl turned to face him, her eyes meeting his with a sense of cautious curiosity. There's something I need to tell you, Alex said, his voice low. We're not going to be on this ship much longer. We're making a stop at the next station to transfer you to another location. Her heart skipped a beat. Another location? Was this the moment when everything would change? Was she finally going to be put to whatever terrible fate humans had in store for her? Are they going to hurt me? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. She tried to hide the fear in her eyes, but Alex could see it clearly. No, he replied, shaking his head. No one is going to hurt you. We're just taking you to a secure place where you'll be processed. It's standard procedure for prisoners of war. She stood up, pacing the small space of her cell as she processed his words. A secure place? That didn't sound like anything good. Her thoughts raced back to the stories she had been told as a child. The stories of prisoners, being taken to strange, dark places where they disappeared never to be seen again. But Alex's voice broke through her racing thoughts. I know you're scared, he said, his eyes softening with understanding. But you don't have to be. I promise you. This will be handled with care. You'll be treated fairly. I know it's hard to believe me, but please, just trust me. For a little while longer. She stopped pacing, her thoughts swirling with doubt. Could she really trust him? Could she trust any human? Her fear clawed at her, but something else, something deep inside her, was telling her that maybe, just maybe this time, things would be different. I want to believe you, she whispered, more to herself than to him. But I've heard so many things. I've been told my whole life that humans are monsters, that you would do anything to get what you want. I'm not a monster, Alex said, his voice firm. I don't know what you've been told, but I've never heard anyone who didn't deserve it. I've never killed for sport or eaten a person, no matter what the stories say. I'm just here to do my job and make sure you're safe. Her eyes searched his face, looking for any sign that he was lying, but she saw none. He seemed completely genuine, and for the first time, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, the stories she had grown up with weren't all true. Why? She asked, her voice small and uncertain. Why are you doing this? Why are you being kind to me when I've done nothing but fear you? Alex paused, his eyes thoughtful. Because you deserve to be treated with respect. Because I don't want to be like the humans in those stories. Because I believe everyone deserves a chance to live without fear, no matter who they are or where they come from. She felt a lump form in her throat as his words sank in. She had always believed that humans were nothing but destroyers, that they were cruel and violent by nature. But Alex was showing her something different, something far more complicated. Maybe humans weren't so simple. Maybe they weren't the monsters she had been taught to fear. I'm not sure I can trust you completely, she said quietly, her voice filled with doubt. But I'm starting to think you're different. Maybe you're not like the others. Alex smiled softly, the warmth in his eyes reassuring her. I'm not like them, he said. I can't speak for everyone, but I can promise you this. I'm doing everything I can to make sure you're safe. I'm here to help, not hurt. For a moment, they stood there in silence, the weight of their words hanging between them. The girl's heart was still heavy with uncertainty, but something had changed. She wasn't as scared as she had been before. She wasn't sure what the future would hold, but for the first time in a long while, she felt like she could trust someone again. As Alex turned to leave, he looked back over his shoulder. Remember, he said quietly, you're not alone. Not anymore. The door slid shut behind him, and the girl stood there for a long time, her thoughts swirling. She wasn't sure what the future held, but she was beginning to realize something important. Not all humans were monsters. Some of them, like Alex, could be kind, and maybe that was the first step toward understanding each other. The next few days passed in a blur for the alien girl. She spent her time reflecting on everything she had learned about Alex, about humans, and about herself. The fear that once gripped her heart had lessened, though it had not entirely disappeared. She still struggled to shake off the stories she had grown up hearing. They had been ingrained in her for so long it was difficult to believe that everything she thought she knew about humanity could be wrong. But there was something different now. Alex's kindness had made her question her beliefs. He had shown her a side of humans that she hadn't thought possible, one that wasn't driven by cruelty or fear. He had made her feel safe, even when she didn't fully understand why. As she sat quietly in her cell, waiting for Alex to come as he always did, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway. She glanced up, knowing exactly who it was. He had become a familiar presence in her life, and for the first time, she felt a sense of hope when he entered. Alex stepped inside, holding a small bundle of clothing in his hands. "I brought you something," he said, his voice friendly. "It's not much, but I thought you might appreciate it." The alien girl eyed the bundle with curiosity. "What is it?" He unfolded the fabric, revealing a simple tunic made from soft material. "It's a new set of clothes. I thought you might like something more comfortable than the uniform they gave you." She took the tunic from him, her fingers brushing against the fabric. It was warm and soft, unlike the cold, metallic materials she was used to. For a moment, she was struck by the simple kindness of the gesture. It was just clothes, something small, but it felt like a symbol of something more, something that made her feel like she wasn't just a prisoner. "Thank you," she said quietly. Feeling the warmth of gratitude spread through her, Alex smiled. "You're welcome. I know it's not much, but I hope it helps you feel a little more at home here." For a moment they stood in silence. The girl, still uncertain of how to fully express her feelings, gazed down at the tunic. She wanted to say more, but words seemed to fail her. How could she explain everything that had changed inside her in such a short time? Instead, she simply nodded and placed the clothes down on her bench. "I'll wear them later," she said softly, her voice quieter than usual. Alex could see the change in her, the small steps she was taking toward understanding. It wasn't easy for her, he knew that. Trust wasn't something that could be built overnight, especially not after years of fear and doubt. But every small gesture, every conversation they had was a step in the right direction. "I know it's hard to trust," Alex said after a long pause, his tone gentle. "But I hope you're starting to see that you don't have to be afraid of me or of humans in general. Not all of us are the same." She looked at him, her dark eyes filled with uncertainty, but also with something new. Something like hope. "I think I'm starting to understand," she said slowly. Maybe you're not what I thought." Alex's heart lifted at her words. It was a small step, but it was a step forward. "That's all I'm asking for. Just a chance to prove that we can be better than the stories you've heard." The girl glanced down at the clothes again, her mind racing with thoughts. She had never imagined a human would do something like this for her. In her world, she had been taught to see humans as ruthless and unforgiving. But Alex was showing her something different, something she hadn't expected. Maybe humans weren't all bad. Maybe, just maybe, they had the capacity for kindness, for understanding, and for change. "I'll try," she said quietly, her voice filled with a mix of doubt and determination. "I'll try to believe that humans can be better. I want to, but it's hard." Alex nodded, his expression understanding. "I know. But you're not alone in this. You don't have to do it by yourself." The girl looked at him, feeling a strange warmth in her chest. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel so alone. Maybe the world wasn't as dark and terrifying as she had once thought. Maybe there was hope, even in the most unexpected places. As the days went on, Alex continued to visit her, and the two of them shared more conversations. Slowly, the girl's walls began to crumble bit by bit. She still had moments of fear, moments when the old stories resurfaced in her mind. But Alex's presence was starting to replace the fear with something else, something she hadn't expected: trust. One evening, after another quiet conversation, the girl sat on her bench, deep in thought. Alex had left her with another promise that things would get better, that there was more to humans than what she had seen. He had given her a sense of calm that she hadn't known she could feel. Maybe she could learn to trust. Maybe she could learn to see humanity not as the monster she had been taught about, but as the complex, flawed, and, dare she admit, compassionate beings that Alex was showing her. The girl closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the day's thoughts settle in her mind. She wasn't sure what would happen next, or if she could ever fully shed the fears she had carried with her. But one thing was certain. Her journey was just beginning, and for the first time she wasn't walking it alone. It had been several weeks since the alien girl had begun to trust Alex. Each day, the space between them seemed to grow smaller. She had started to understand that not all humans were like the ones she had been taught to fear. In fact, Alex had shown her more kindness than she had ever imagined was possible from someone of his kind. Still, doubts remained in her mind. The stories she had grown up with, the warnings that had been drilled into her since childhood, didn't simply vanish. They were like shadows that followed her every step, no matter how much she tried to ignore them. She wasn't sure if she could ever truly forget them, or if she would always see humans as potential threats. But when Alex came to her cell that morning, something was different. His usual calm demeanor had shifted. There was a seriousness in his eyes that immediately caught her attention. "We need to talk," Alex said, his voice steady but with a hint of urgency. The girl looked up from where she sat on her bench. Her heart skipped a beat. "What's happened? Is something wrong?" Alex stepped closer to the bars of her cell. "We've been given new orders," he said, his tone serious. "There's a security breach on the ship. We're under attack." Her heart raced as she stood up, the fear from her past creeping back into her mind. "What do you mean? Who's attacking us?" "It's another alien ship," Alex replied, his face grim. "We don't know their tensions yet, but we need to prepare. There's a chance they might try to take you back, and I won't let that happen." The girl's mind raced. The sudden change in the situation left her feeling uneasy. She hadn't thought much about the danger of being a prisoner until now. Her thoughts were clouded with the fear of being caught again by another enemy, of being sent back to a place where humans were nothing but monsters. "I don't want to go back," she said, her voice shaky. "Please, don't let them take me." Alex's eyes softened with empathy. "I won't let that happen," he promised. "I'm going to make sure you're safe no matter what." She could see the sincerity in his eyes. Even in the chaos of the attack, he was still focused on her safety. His words comforted her, but the fear was still there, gnawing at her insides. What if this was the end? What if they couldn't protect her? As if reading her thoughts, Alex spoke again, his voice firm. "I'm not going to let anyone hurt you. You've come a long way, and I won't let that be taken away from you." The girl nodded, trying to steady her breath. She didn't want to show weakness, but she couldn't help the way her body trembled. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Alex gave her a reassuring smile. "It's okay to be scared. You've been through a lot. But we'll get through this together. I promise." There was a long pause as Alex stepped back from the bars. The alien girl stood there, unsure of what to do. She had always been taught to run, to fight, to survive at any cost. But now with Alex there was something new, something she hadn't experienced before. Trust. And a strange, budding sense of hope. "I don't want to be a prisoner anymore," she said, her voice stronger this time. "I don't want to live in fear of what humans might do to me." Alex nodded. "You don't have to be afraid of me. You don't have to be afraid of all humans. We're not all the same. And I won't let anyone harm you." Just then, the loud sound of alarms echoed through the ship. The lights flickered and the girl's heart sank. She had heard those alarms before, but never with such urgency. The attack was closer now. It was real. She wasn't just a prisoner in a cell anymore. She was part of something bigger, something more dangerous. Alex turned quickly and headed toward the door. "Stay here. I'll be back as soon as I can, don't worry." She nodded, feeling the weight of his words settle on her shoulders. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust him with all her heart. But the fear was still there, the fear of being torn away from this new, fragile life she had started to build. As Alex left, the girl sat back down on the bench, her mind racing. She had been brought up to fight and survive, but now she wasn't sure what to do. Should she trust Alex completely? Could she truly believe that humans were capable of saving her, of protecting her? The sound of blaster fire echoed through the ship, followed by the roar of engines, signaling that the battle had begun. The girl stood up, pacing back and forth in her small cell. The ship was under attack, and she had no idea what was happening. She felt powerless, trapped in a world that was beyond her control. But then she remembered Alex's words. She wasn't alone anymore. He had promised to protect her, to keep her safe. Maybe, just maybe, this time humans could be the heroes. Maybe she wasn't as helpless as she had thought. As the minutes passed, she tried to calm her racing thoughts. She had to believe in something. She had to trust in Alex. She had to believe that the humans weren't the monsters she had been taught to fear. The door to her cell opened and Alex returned, his face slightly bruised but determined. "We're getting out of here," he said, his voice filled with urgency. "We have to move now." The alien girl looked at him, her heart pounding in her chest. For the first time, she felt like she wasn't alone in this fight. She wasn't just a prisoner anymore. She was a part of something bigger, something worth fighting for. She nodded. "Let's go." And with that, they left the cell, heading into the unknown, together. The blaring alarms echoed through the ship as Alex and the alien girl made their way through the narrow hallways. The sound of distant explosions vibrated the walls, and the ship seemed to tremble with each passing moment. The chaos outside felt distant, but inside, the tension was thick. The girl's heart pounded in her chest, her mind racing. This wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a fight for everything she had learned in the past few weeks. Alex led her through the maze of corridors, his expression focused. But he glanced back at her occasionally to make sure she was still following. He didn't speak much, but his presence was reassuring. The girl's trust in him had grown stronger over time, but now, faced with the reality of their situation, she couldn't help but feel the old fear creeping back in. What if this was the moment everything fell apart? What if they didn't make it out of this alive? "Stay close," Alex said quietly, his voice calm despite the urgency of the situation. "We'll find a way out. You're safe with me." The girl nodded, even though a part of her wasn't sure if she could believe those words anymore. What did safe even mean in a situation like this? But she followed him anyway, trusting that he would do everything in his power to protect her. They reached the ship's control center, where Alex quickly began to assess the situation. The control room was chaotic, filled with soldiers and crew members working to keep the ship afloat. A few of them glanced up as Alex and the alien girl entered, but no one said a word. The atmosphere was tense. Everyone was focused on the task at hand. Alex walked over to one of the communication consoles and began typing quickly, pulling up information about the ongoing attack. The girl stood by his side, watching as he worked. She couldn't make sense of most of the screens, but she could see the seriousness of the situation. The enemy ship was gaining on them, and time was running out. "We're not going to outrun them," Alex muttered to himself, his fingers flying across the console. "We need to find a way to defend ourselves." The girl glanced around the room, feeling helpless. She had never been in a situation like this before. She had always been told to fight, to survive at all costs. But this was different. There were no rules here, no clear path to safety. "It was just chaos, Alex," she said softly, her voice uncertain. "What's going to happen to us?" He stopped for a moment, his eyes meeting hers. There was a flicker of concern in his expression, but his voice remained steady. "We're going to fight. We're going to get through this together." The girl's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't sure if she believed him, but the way he said it, so sure, so unwavering, made her feel like it was possible. She had never been a part of something like this before, and the fear that had once dominated her thoughts now mixed with something else, something stronger. A sense of determination. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. Alex turned away from the console and walked over to her. He placed a hand on her shoulder, giving her a reassuring squeeze. "I'm scared too. But we're in this together. I won't let anything happen to you." She looked up at him, searching his face for any sign of doubt. But there was none. He was serious, his focus entirely on her safety. For the first time, she believed him. She had spent so long running, from fear, from humans, from everything that had been drilled into her by her people. But now, standing here with Alex, she realized that fear didn't have to control her anymore. "We'll make it out of this," she said, her voice stronger now. "We'll fight together." Alex gave her a proud smile, his eyes softening. "That's the spirit." The communication console beeped, signaling a new message. Alex quickly read it, his face growing serious again. "They're preparing to board. We don't have much time." Without another word, Alex led her to a nearby escape pod, his movements quick and decisive. The girl followed, her heart racing as they entered the pod. Alex strapped himself in and then gestured for her to do the same. "This is it," he said, his voice calm despite the urgency of the situation. "We'll get out of here, and we'll make sure you're safe." The girl nodded, her hands shaking as she fastened the straps. She didn't know what was going to happen next. She didn't know if they would make it through this. But she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't alone anymore. She wasn't just a prisoner anymore. She was part of something bigger, something that she was willing to fight for. As the escape pod shot away from the ship, the girl looked out the small window, watching as the battle continued. The human ship was under attack, but they were escaping. They were leaving it all behind, together. And as the pod hurtled through space, the girl realized something important. She wasn't running anymore. She was moving forward, ready to face whatever came next with Alex by her side. The fear that had once controlled her no longer had power over her. She had found something stronger: hope, trust, and the belief that she wasn't alone in this fight. Together, they would face the future, and together, they would find a way to survive.